Alright guys, so after a day or two I kind of walked away from this item. I just needed to kind of do some other projects and not think about this a little bit. So after thinking about it a little bit more, coming back looking at all the artwork, I decided we're going to try to capture the hair drawings as much as possible from what everyone's drawing online. And I figured we'll kind of start planning out the head a little bit more. So what we have to do is we got to kind of rebuild the skull and make sure everything's kind of uniformed. And looking online, a lot of the drawings, the way her hair is, she's got like a little bit of a bang piece that comes up like around here, and then she's got a little piece of hair that comes over here, another piece of hair that comes like over here, and then we got a little bit underneath the, whatchamacallit, the sideburns that come down. So I'm going to utilize some pieces on this hair and I'm going to take some off. So I decided what we're going to do is we're going to take this chunk off here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this chunk off here. We're going to leave this piece over here because that's going to be like the sideburn area. And the same thing over here, that's going to be the sideburn area. But what we're going to do here is we're going to take off this tip a little bit here and this here. And then also this piece over here is going to come out as well. This chunk is going to come out, and then this one over here is going to come out. So what we're doing is we're going to basically resculpt and we're going to bend them down coming around because that's what we have to do. Plus, I'm not really good at really sculpting like human ears, but her ears are kind of like pointy, so I could probably get away with sculpting those ears from scratch. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually sculpt those ears coming out, so this way we could put the ball earrings underneath her ears, and then over, I guess it's about right about here, and then like right about here I would say. Somewhere like around there and there is like where the horns are going to go. And then of course over here is where we got the crown. And then her hair sort of comes around like so into like a ponytail, and it comes around. So I'm just kind of giving myself markings of like how I can envision it. Yeah, so these are coming out too far. I really want to capture this artwork as much as possible. So just kind of scrolling through some of this art and seeing how things look and what people have done, we could definitely go with it. So these pieces up here are going to be shorter than those over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the garage. I'm going to do some chopping today. At least get this kind of like prepped up. Maybe clean it up a little bit for tonight. And then I got the holidays with family events for the week, so I could kind of walk away with it. And I could come back like in the middle of the week, near the end of the week, and really have a fresh look at the piece. And that's kind of what I do with a lot of these. So sometimes when things get delayed on videos, it's because I like to kind of step away from the item, cover it, not think about it for 2 or 3 days, come back, and then I'm like, okay, I'm seeing what I'm doing wrong, I need to see what I need to fix. It's kind of just something I learned in art school with one of my professors. So that's where we're at. So hopefully near the end of the day we'll come back and this will kind of be cleaned up and ready to be set up for, you know, just fine-tuning and getting it where we need. Alright, so I went in the garage and I did some chopping, so you could pretty much see how I kind of cleaned up the head. Got a little bit of the jawline to build back over here, only because the way the hair was sculpted over there, I got to kind of fix that up. But what I like to do is take some silly putty before I do any of this sculpting work, just to kind of start giving me an idea. So it's just old silly putty that I kind of use for stuff like this and other things. So just grab some, just kind of looking at some of the designs online right now in front of me on the screen. So we would have like a piece of hair kind of over here, like so. Because I got to kind of fudge it a little bit to go with the sculpt that was there. Then we got a little bit of a patch of it over here, like so. Kind of comes down like that. And then there's a little bit of a point in the front that's kind of like the bangs. So there would be some kind of like hair that kind of goes like so in front. Like that. So it's kind of, the hair's kind of set up a little bit like that. Of course, you know, it'll be a little bit puffier, you know. And then, of course, there would be 2 horns. You know, you'd have one horn kind of coming out around here. And then you have the other horn over here. So you start getting a little bit of an idea of kind of like how it's going to look and where I'm going with it. This is going to be a little bit tricky. I think the bang in the front, Like I've seen some that come down really far, so I kind of try to come down between the eyes. Now the only problem that I'm facing is a little bit of this piece over here because of the one bang that was there. So I might have to kind of go in there and chop that out a little bit more. And then it's always good to have something that you can just kind of practice, give you guys a visual. So then we would have an ear like here, like so. And then let's see. The ponytail in the back is actually easier. What's the hard part right now is kind of getting all this front stuff done. So you'd have the ears and sort of something like that. That's kind of like what we're going for. And then just to kind of add a little bit more to it, just to give it a little bit more, take a ball, about that much, and this much, and then I guess we would have the little bit of that ball earring over here, and the other one sort of like over there. So just by looking at that right now, it's giving me a visual of like where we're going with this, you know. The horns kind of come up like so, you know, something like that, you know, kind of just running with it. And then of course the last piece, just to kind of, I got an idea on how to do the crown. It's going to be a little tricky, but of course the crown is going to be a detachable piece that you kind of put in at the end. So we just kind of roll this off on an angle and then squeeze it like so. And then of course the crown will be somewhere like up there. So that's kind of like what we're going for almost, you know, in a sense. Gives you, it's just, you know, it's a good visual. So lets me know how I got to plan this out. So definitely keeping these two pieces here help a lot with the sculpt because it's very hard to get these little points in sculpting, and since they're already here we utilize it. And then as far as the back of the hair, I don't really need to do it, but the hair is going to kind of come to a ponytail, and I guess we might as well just keep going with it. Yeah, this stuff is kind of cold. So it's a cold day today, and then even in my studio it's a little bit chilly. So silly putty kind of, so you know, so we'll have like, you know, the ponytail coming off at the end. Of course it'll be a bigger ponytail. So that's kind of what we're going with. So I'm going to go back into the garage and I'm going to kind of clean this little edge up over here, see if I could rebuild the eyebrow area a little bit more, kind of get that back. I don't mind, like I said, I got to kind of take this sculpt over the eyes because it's very hard to kind of bring all that sculpt back, but that's okay. On the front, it's not going to be as flat. It's going to come out a little bit puffier, you know, like a little bit puffier over here. It just, you know, we're just throwing with it. So what we're going to do is we'll take all this off. Now that we got our idea, I'm going to try to clean up a little bit over here. I'm going to try to clean up a little bit over there some more. And then what we'll do is we'll rebuild this jawline back here. And then what we'll start doing is we'll do the ears first. We'll get the ears out first. And then we'll do the hair, at least the bangs. Or, I don't know, like I said, I'm thinking out loud. We'll do the ears. We'll start planning out where the horns are going to go. And then we'll do the hair. And then the horns will be separate. So I'm going to probably sculpt the horns either onto it or sculpt it separate, so I can attach them. It's either or. We'll kind of go with it. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But other than that, I think we're shaped up pretty well. Alright, so I did some more sanding around the head. I kind of shaped it up a little bit more for the skull. I cleaned up a little bit over here a little bit more. I also did a little bit over here, and then also the jawline over there I kind of fixed up as well. So right now I'm still kind of planning everything, and I want to just kind of start working on elements. So I figure a good starting point just to start getting an idea is working out the horns, because I figure if I put the horns up here, then that'll give me a chance to plan out the ears and then work out the hair around it. If I start doing all the hair now and then I try to fit the horns in, it might not work, because you figure horns are growing out of your skull anyway and the hair kind of grows around it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. So we're going to start kind of prepping the horns, at least getting the basic shapes up. So this is just regular brass rod, K&S brass rod. They usually come in like, you know, 12 inches or so. I always buy these for my stuff because you get them in all kinds of sizes, and it's good for projects where some projects you might need a really thick one, and in smaller projects like this you might need a thin one. So we're going to start planning out the horn. So cut this in half. And then what we're going to start doing is we'll start bending and shaping it. So I'm looking at some of the pictures now, and the basic horns, you know, some people draw them kind of like, you know, bent, some draw them a little bit curved, some draw them pretty simple. I kind of want to follow the Bowser a little bit with some of these other horns that got kind of like a little bit of a bend. So we're going to hold two together, and then we're going to start kind of bending them in shape. So if you hold two together and you shape them up for one side, and then when you flip the other one over there, it should be about the same thing. So the top of the horn sort of kind of bends a little, so kind of bends a little bit out like that, and then it sort of kind of bends inward. So it's kind of sort of something like that. So if we take both of them and then we do it, we would have the horn sort of bent like that. So that's a good starting point, I would say. I'm looking at the size of it. And the reason why I like to buy a lot of these K&S rods is because if for some odd reason I bent it wrong, I can always pull out a couple more of them. Not that expensive, but they help. So that's kind of like the size I'm looking for. And I think that'll work out well. So what I'm going to do is we'll kind of mark it where it's going to kind of stop. At least on these. So you figure they're going to go about, I bend this in a little bit more. Alright, so you figure they're going to go in about this far, I would say. So what we need to start doing is taking Aves, Magic Sculpt, or whatever you got. I'm going to use this Aves because I mixed up a lot. I got a few projects I'm working on. And I'll start just throwing a basic Ave around this for now. And then I can just kind of let it sit on the piece here. And then the next day, what I could start building up and just keep going. And then probably what I'll have to do is I'll probably have to bend this or kind of like wrap this in a circle so I can start holding it easier. Because if I hold it now, it's just going to keep twisting. But we just need to get a basic shape on it for now and go from there. Alright, sort of a quick update while we're working on this stuff. So I'm working on the ears right now, and it's very soft, so the ears kind of flopping down on this one. This one kind of stayed up pretty well. The good thing about ears is they don't have to be exactly like the same on each side, because if you look at your own ears, and if you take a picture on both ears and you flip them, you'll realize that some of them are a little bit different. Like maybe one earlobe comes down a little bit lower than the other one. If you take your whole face and you cut, if you mirror it, like in Photoshop, or you go in a mirror and you take this side and you flip it over, you look like an alien, because if you look at your eyes and you look at your nostrils and stuff, you'll see one eye is lower than the other, one nostril is usually bigger, and so on and so forth. Look at famous actresses, actors, singers, models, you will see one eye is always bigger or one eye is lower than the other. It's just a natural thing. You just don't realize it because you don't look for it. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. So once this kind of cures up in like, you know, another hour, I could kind of like tweak out the ears and make them cleaner a little bit. But a lot of the hair is going to cover them, so we really won't see too much of the ears. It's the points I'm worried about. So while I was working on the horns, what happened was I had to kind of twist the wire. I forgot to do it. So I'm like turning it and it's becoming a real pain. So now I got something where it doesn't turn. Alright, so I had a chance to get into the garage and shape down the horns a little bit. So I'm kind of liking where they're at. I just might take them down a little bit more. They might be just too long. And I kind of just shape this down a little bit more. So I'm just going to keep plugging away and get them to where I want them. You can kind of see what's happening here as the brass rod is starting to stick out. That's not an issue. If you have a grinding tool with your Dremel, you could kind of grind it up. So I'm probably going to take them down a little bit more. I think they're just too long for where I want to go, but I don't want them being too short. So it's just a matter of taking the tips down a little bit. So you can see I'm working on two of them now at the same time. Now there's a little bit of a tip for you guys. You can cheat. You can actually just sculpt one horn, and where you get it to where you want it and you like it, what you could do is you can make a throwaway mold, like what they call it in a hobby, or you can use it for a really good mold. It depends on what material you have. So this stuff is called Easy Mold. Sometimes it's called Need a Mold. You can find it in like Michael's, AC Moore's and stuff like that, or on eBay. And what you do is you mix A and B together equally. And then what you could do is you could squeeze it around your item. Now the only problem with this stuff is if you squeeze it around your item, but you didn't squeeze it correctly, you can get like, you know, bubbles, or you can get a little spidering. And then when you pop out your mold, you know, like when you cut it after it cures, and then you pour in resin, you pop it out, you might see bubbles and it might be messed up. If you really want to do a nice, good, clean mold, there's better materials out there where you can actually have this sitting in like a box or something and have it pour around and let it cure and make a better mold. Now there's only two reasons why I don't want to do this by cheating this way with this figure. Is one, doing it with this way with this stuff, you're going to get air bubbles and the resin won't cure correctly because we're in the middle of the winter time. My studio isn't really warm enough for using resin because you need to have like 72 degree weather to make resin cure properly. And plus it's little fumes. I only like doing it in the garage. I don't like using the resin inside too much. So I'm not going to do it that way. And then plus, the other reason is I like the idea of sculpting two horns and making them look different because they're growing different out of her head. Because with this type of custom, I don't want, you know, perfectly matched horns on each side. I'd like to have the idea of like one might be a little bit broken or chipped. You know, I'm going to have fun with it. And the other one might just be grown a little bit differently. I think it's a little bit more fun that way. So that's kind of what we're doing. So like you can see, they're a little bit too long for where I'm going with it, so I'm going to cut them down a little bit more, maybe like that far. And then what I'm going to do is once that's where I want it, we're going to wrap a really thin layer of Aves around it, and I'm going to do my sculpting of the texture I want to do on it, just to give it like some kind of a growth. And then like I said, maybe one horn at the tip I might kind of break up a little bit like it's broken at the one tip, just to have some fun with it. But that's kind of where we're at. Just give you guys a little bit of a tip on this one in case you ever got into sculpting and you wanted to sculpt something. It works. Now the other thing too about this stuff real quick is, say you sculpted a really cool little item. What you could do is you can mix it together and you can push this onto the mold, let it cure and pop it out, and you can pour resin and make copies that way. That's what some people do with stuff like if they ever sculpt pouches. You know, like if they're making a superhero and they got to sculpt a couple pouches, they can make one pouch and copy it a couple times. You know, you could have done it with the spikes too. If I needed specific spikes and I couldn't find them online, I could actually just make a spike and then make copies that way. You know, that's the type of way of just making things easier when sculpting. So let me get these horns set up and then we can start detailing them. Okay, so we got a lot of the bone on the horns pretty much sculpted up. I really wanted to go with this nice fun little design. I saw a lot of anime kits that had this. Some people would draw their horns like perfectly smooth and shiny. Some are just pure white. Some actually have a little bit of line work in them. I figured with these would be a little bit more fun for it. Just gives a little bit more bone texture. Plus the tips I broke up on these to make it look like the bone coming out of the tail. So if I'm painting up the tail bones the same color as these, it'll all kind of like be uniform together. That's kind of like what I was going for. So basically what this was is I had a bunch of A's Fix-It Sculpt that I use for sculpting hair because I'm working on some other kits as well. And I was doing some hair work tonight. So I had a little bit extra. So I figured it'd be a perfect time to do these horns and get these set up. Alright, we're going to start working on the crown. So what I did is just had a piece of like cardboard here, and I rolled it up and I wrapped it in wax paper. So the idea is we're going to wrap A's around this, let it cure overnight, and then pop it out, and the wax paper should help it without sticking. So the crown sort of has like a little bit of a, spreading out like look. It's not going to be a perfect cylinder. Because a lot of the artwork I'm looking at some are a little bit stylized, some are straight. I want to have a little fun with it. So it can't really be too small here, but it can't be too big up here. So I'm not really sure how big the circle I want to be right over here, and then I don't want to go too wide where it's hitting the, the horns. So it's better just to kind of wrap A's around this whole piece, let it cure up, and then come back tomorrow and then kind of like start sanding down to where I think I might need it. It'll be easier that way. So this is just a matter of getting sort of like a cylinder set up. This is just regular black A's like I've used in my other videos. Just different colors, same stuff. Trying not to cut through the paper though, that's the problem. So my idea is once this cures up and it's a good cylinder shape, I can sand it down, and then what I can do is sort of like put it on the head right there. If I figure that's too small or it's the perfect size, I can just kind of flat sand it across, and then if I feel that I need to come down a little bit more, I can keep sanding until I get it to the point where I figure it's good here and then it's good up here, and I'll have my basic shape. So I'm just going to shape this up a little bit off camera. I'm going to set it up on a just somewhere where it's going to be able to cure, and then what I could do the next day is sort of probably sand it down a little bit while it's still on here, make life a little bit easier, and then pop it out and go from there. So that should be a good starting point, at least for the crown. Just want to make sure that it's even going around, and yeah, that should be a good stylized crown. So I'll go set this up, let this cure, we come back, and we can keep playing around and getting this shaped up. Okay, so I took the nose down a little bit, and it's got a little bit of that point to it. It almost reminds me now of that Sandra Bullock nose, and that's kind of what I was like going for. So we basically took off that little bit of a roundness to it, and we gave it like a little bit of a pointing up. So I think this should work out pretty cool. So that's pretty much what I wanted to go with the nose. Alright, so I think we got along pretty well. I put the horns on her head, and I gotta let them cure up a little bit. Even though I did use glue at the bottom of it, still that rod that's kind of like bent and hooked into there, it's going to hold it, but I still want to kind of secure these pieces. So what I'm going to be doing is putting a little bit of a ring, like I did with these spikes in the back, around the horns as well. And then once we start sculpting the hair, it should all come together and kind of flow over those areas. I also have to find the earrings, the little ball earrings. I'll probably have to go over to like Michael's or EC Moore this weekend and check it out, see if I can find anything. But at this point, I like to put things together and just do like a 360 to see where we're at. And it's a good thing I did, and I put the hand in here because it's almost hitting the horn up here. And like in one of my first videos, someone mentioned that we should put like the peach parasol, which I guess is like the umbrella. Hopefully I said that right. Forgive me if I didn't. What I'm going to do is we'll probably do that, but we'll probably like bend it and make it burnt. So this way it's not like hitting the face too much. It's kind of like offset a little bit, so I think that'll work. But the thing is, I have to be careful is how we build it and how heavy it is, because we only have so much meat in this wrist and the magnet here. If I have to redo the magnets when I think it's going to be too heavy, I will. We'll put stronger ones in, but we'll see what happens down the line. Because you could break the wrist. See, like if it's just a hand that's like pointing or it's like this, I wouldn't mind breaking the wrist and then putting some A's in there and a little bit of a metal pin and hold it. But since we're actually holding something heavy, I'm a little bit worried about making this weaker. So I don't want to break the wrist and turn it. I think that'll cause too many issues. I think just by keeping it this way but bending the piece would work out. So that's pretty much where we're at. One of the other things too is I had to Dremel out a hole in back of the head. And the reason why is because we're going to start, when we start sculpting the hair in front and the bangs and the sideburns and all that stuff is going to be fine. But what we do is we sculpt out the hair coming to like a ponytail. We have to put rods that are coming out holding the hair, because if you just sculpt hair onto here and then like you move the head on and off, you don't have a lot of meat here and you wind up just breaking the hair off. Like you won't break the hair that's here, you'll break the hair that's connected here. So what I'll end up doing is I'll have a couple rods that we'll put in there. We'll have like one rod coming down, another rod, and then we'll attach it in there with like Magic Sculpt. And then when I sculpt the hair and I get it, it'll be really nice and secure. So the only way you could really snap it is if you were like to rip the horns or something off, you know. I don't know, we'll see what happens. So that's where we got to go. And now one of the other things too is we got to work out the crown a little bit more too. So I got to kind of stop where I'm at a little bit, and we got to kind of focus on the crown. So I still have this piece here, and that crown is a little bit too small in that area. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably like take it up just a little bit more. I don't know, maybe like maybe a little bit less than ½ an inch or so. And then what I'll do is I'll chop off the top up here pretty high, and then I can prime it and start designing the crown pieces. So this way, if I have at least the base crown shape, I can actually work out the hair and I can keep the crown pushing it on and off, and then I can actually fine-tune the crown at the end. So that's kind of where we're at. So I'm going to get this set up, and then we'll come back a little bit later. I'll work out the rings around there. We'll get some more stuff kind of cleaned up, and then just keep plugging away. Alright, so you can see here's the crown. I used my blue pencil, which is great, on a gray primer from Duplicolor. You really can mark out what you need to do and sand it down and everything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in the garage and I'm going to cut these down. But I'm going to cut out a little bit above the triangle, so this way I can use sandpaper and emery boards to get it to where I need it to get it. And I think the crown will work out pretty cool. And then once we get that done and we sand it down and get it cleaned up, I'll have to make markings for the two eyes. I'm not sure if I'm going to Dremel in or if I'm going to sculpt outwards. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do with that. But one of the tricky parts is putting the little ball tops on all the little tips of the crowns. You can sculpt it, but they might break off, and then you could glue something on it with them, but they might break off as well. So I got an idea on how to attach some balls on each tip of the crown with a little bit of a rod going in there, but we'll see if we can work that out. And then basically once all the crown and everything's done in there, we can sculpt out the mushroom in the inside, get that going. And then what I'll probably end up doing is setting up the inside with another rod, square peg rod, so this way we can use this to kind of go in and out when I sculpt the hair. and then at the end I can actually paint this separate and then just glue it in at the top. So that's kind of like the whole process of what I'm going with. So I'm gonna hop in the garage now, get this cleaned up. We'll come back once it's all pretty much ready to get fine. Alright, so I have a little bit of an issue with just like getting worried with stuff. If you just glue these little pearl pieces to the top of these crown, they'll just break off. So my idea is I glued a rod into it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to Dremel out a line in the inside of each of these parts of the crown, and then what I can do is I can put the rod and glue it in there like that and then seam it with Aves. So this way I'll have the piece on top of the crown and I don't have to worry about it breaking or falling off, because gluing works fine. If you could just put a dab of glue, you do it and everything, but because you'll be handling this head going in and out with the body, it's better to make this as secured as possible. So my next step is I'm going to go in the garage, I'll drum out these little pieces here, so this way I can just attach these in and we can seam it up. And then I got a couple little errors from cutting the crown here and there, and we can just fine tune it up, and then once that's done we can fill in the inside and we'll have a done crown. Alright, so we're getting the crown to where I really want to get it there. I might, if I have to shrink it down a little bit more, I can always just sand it down this way. You know, so that's the good thing about making this type of a crown. Also, there's little holes on top of each ball because it's they're beads basically. So what I have to do is once I prime it in, I can actually fill it in with putty and I can just do some fine sanding and filling it up. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up some Aves and fill in the areas. I wanted to show what I was doing on camera, but it's basically just gluing and adding them in. I had to line them up, but the problem was is like sometimes I glued my fingers together. I had to use some nail polish remover acetone basically to get the glue off, and it's just, you know, it was just messy. So I just figured let me just get these done, and then what I'll do now is off camera I'll fill this all in, and hopefully by the time we come back it'll be primed up and we can start actually sculpting the inside for the little like mushroom area and then start setting it up for the head. Alright, so I put the Aves inside, I locked it in place. I just put the crown on top of the head just for now, just so I can actually get a look at it. This is actually like, you know, 4 feet away from me right now. What I like to do is just kind of like walk away from the piece and just get like a feel of scaling. And I think this is a good scaling because I think once I put the hair on her, the crown's going to raise up just a little bit more, so this way the horns won't look as big because the hair is going to be kind of puffy. So that's kind of what I'm going for. So it should work out pretty good. And plus the ponytail is really going to look big and behind her, so the crown won't look as large. And I think the scaling in is pretty well. So what I usually like to do is I kind of walk around the item and just kind of looking and stuff. So and like I said, if I feel the crown is a little bit too long, I can always sand down the bottom. There is one point of the crown that's going to be forward. I forget what it is, but right now I just threw it on just to see what we're looking at. So that's kind of where we're at. So hopefully by tomorrow we'll have it nice and cleaned up and we could start prepping up the inside, the rod, and then we could get this all ready for sculpting the hair. Okay, so while the crown is drying, I'm kind of testing some ideas. So I found these rhinestones I showed in a previous video of blue, and then I had some of these old kind of oval shaped blue rhinestones. The only problem with these, I'm not really sure if they'll work too well. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just doing some testing. I'm putting like a little bit of Aves, and then what I'm doing is I'm squeezing the rhinestone onto it just to see what it would look like. Because the idea is I'm going to have Aves on here, but I won't have the rhinestone. So this way I can paint her up, and at the end I could paint up this little Aves part silver, and then I can glue the rhinestone onto it, so whichever one I decide to use. I'm probably leaning more toward this circle one because I think it'll look better in the end. I like the idea that this blue is a little bit darker. I don't know how these other ones would look, but the idea is just a matter of creating the circle piece on her first and going from there. So I'll have to do this off camera because it's a little bit more detailing and I can't get the camera in the way. But just to give you guys an idea of what this one might look like, so it's just testing just to see kind of where we would go with it. And I mean that one looks pretty good too, so maybe we'll go with that one, you know. It's just a matter of can I get the Aves fixed in here to the point where this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of these rhinestones that I just pulled out. I'll glue this to another rod, and then what I'll do is I'll test them, and then we'll come back and I'll give you guys an idea of like exactly what I decided to go with. Alright, so after some testing, this is what we're going to go with. So what I did is I put some A's in there and I tested both of the rhinestones, and this one is kind of what it came up. So I pushed the A's in there, and then I tested it and I said, okay, this is the one I'm going to use. So then what I did is I kind of scratched up the A's in there with the primer so that piece sticks a little bit better. And then what I did is I grabbed another rhinestone and I put it in there. So I think that's going to work out really well. I kind of like the way it's angled and everything. So the only problem now is we just got to kind of pop this one out like so. And then what I'll do is I'll let this cure up for a little while, and then what I'll do is I'll put the rhinestone back on just to make sure everything's looking good, and then that should be well. So this way when I paint up the item in black latex, then what I could do is I could paint this up in silver, and then I could grab one of the rhinestones, put a little bit of drop of glue, and put it in there nice and even. So this way it's better to work that way than try to paint it. So I think that's going to work out pretty well. Shaped it up pretty good, and I think that's going to work with the outfit. So it looks a little bit weird now, but once it's painted up, it should all come together. Alright, so I think this would be a good chance to close out this video of the series, and you can see the crown is done, the horns are all set up, and we're getting ready to start focusing on the hair next, which I love sculpting hair, so this should be a lot of fun. So what I did off camera was I worked on the crown a little bit more. I actually filled it in with some filler primer. I wet sanded, I smoothed it out, I cleaned up the inside up there as well, and then I added a little bit of a hollow brass rod underneath and I filled that in because once we work on the sideburns, we'll let them cure one night, and then the next night I'll be able to do one whole session where I can actually do the bangs, and then I can actually do the back of the hair being pulled into the ponytail. So then once the hair is up here with the bangs, then I'll be able to line up the crown where it can actually be removable, because even though I could sculpt around it and make it work, it'll be a nightmare to paint up. So I would really like to make sure this crown is nice and shiny and smooth so that I'll be able to put it up on its separate rod, because I'll have one of these rods like this, like so, and then I'll be able to paint it up like that and make it nice and clean, because whenever you have something in here and you get overspray on stuff, it'll be a nightmare to keep it smooth, so it's going to be a little bit easier. But other than that, yeah, we're looking pretty good. I really like the way it's coming together. I think once we get that hair on her, it's really going to pull together, and then once you add the spikes, and then we figure out with the hand, we'll go from there. Now, there's one last thing about this as I'm working on her. We're probably going to do a little bit of an extra to the base. I want to have a little bit more fun with this one. So you can see right now she kind of moves, and that's bad because this key is not set up correctly. So we probably might change the key up, or we might do something else. I have to kind of figure it out. But I think we're going to have a little bit of fun with the base. So instead of her just being on a black base, we're going to do maybe something a little bit closer to Mario. I got kind of an idea. It should be really cool and just make it pop a little bit more. But that's where we're at. So thanks for watching, and we're going to be back with the next part soon.